Le sommet international de l'éducation du futur réunit une soixantaine de conférenciers du monde entier. Des pionniers et des innovateurs issus du monde de l'éducation, bien évidemment, mais également des êtres inspirants, issus des chemins de sagesse ou des chemins d'apprentissage et de créativité dans différents domaines. Les arts, les sciences, l'économie, le lien avec la nature, le sport, etc. Des expériences et des chemins de vie qui sont un formidable enrichissement pour le monde de l'éducation. Le professionnalisme des traductions, en simultané, et l'incroyable richesse de toutes ces conférences offrent un horizon de point de vue vaste et varié, très complet, qui en font au final une véritable formation professionnelle pour les enseignants, les éducateurs et tous les professionnels de l'éducation, mais également une formation à la parentalité consciente et une formation individuelle à la vie consciente. Face à toute cette richesse et aux divers retours, nous avons décidé d'offrir toutes ces conférences à tous, partout dans le monde, en français et en anglais, quelquefois en allemand et en espagnol. Découvrez la vision d'acteurs audacieux et influents du changement, vers un monde éthique, solidaire, généreux et profondément respectueux de tous, des cultures, des peuples, des règnes et de la planète. Un incroyable panel de conférences, couvrant toutes les dimensions de l'éducation, pour un futur ayant du sens, une humanité épanouie et une terre qui respire. Une chose est sûre, votre vie, et à travers vous, celle des enfants, ne sera plus la même après avoir écouté toutes ces conférences. Pour avancer, nous avons besoin de vous, nous avons besoin de votre générosité solidaire. L'organisation du sommet et l'édition des conférences ont nécessité des milliers d'heures de travail et nécessitent encore beaucoup de temps et d'investissement. Nous faisons appel aux dons libres et spontanés pour compléter le financement du sommet et, si possible, continuer à l'enrichir de nouvelles conférences. Votre soutien est vraiment précieux et vital pour aller jusqu'au bout de cette aventure extraordinaire. Merci.
Okay, so hello to everybody and welcome to the International Summit of Education for the Future. This is a wonderful summit who connect 60 keynote speakers from all around the world who share so many richness for a better future for the children, or humanity and the planet. And I'm so happy to be able to introduce you after this very rich day, our friend Denise Scotto. Denise is a practicing lawyer. She works at the United Nations in New York, and she's also an ordained interfaith minister. And really, Denise is an amazing woman who really stands up for humanity. And her influence on human rights on the work stage is very exhaustive. And I'm so honored that we can listen to her. She's always been a voice for the innocents, the oppressed, and women and children. And so always working for a better world and realization of world peace. And she made so many things. Denise, you will talk about us. So currently she's the chair of the International Day of Yoga Committee at the United Nations, who is an official partner of the International Summit of Education for the Future. And so today she will tell us how educating through the Golden Rule can help to live in harmony with our precious planet, our animal companions, and all life. So, Denise, I'm so happy to give you the word.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Abel. It's so good to be with everyone, and it's my honor. I'm deeply grateful to be with everyone, and I'm speaking for my individual capacity, how touched I was to have you contact me to tell me about this summit, and how, on behalf of the International Day of Yoga Committee at the UN, how we're very delighted to be a partner of this summit because it is so special. And one of our International Day of Yoga Committee at the UN advisors is with us today. Zamling Kotab Ken is here, and he's joining us as a panelist. He's coming from Chile to join us, and I'm hoping that we can have some remarks later on. I don't want to twist your arm, but I do want to, have you join us, as well as one of our core members of the Yoga Day Committee, Isel Toprakli, who's joining us too today. So I'm grateful for them as well. As we know, and I'm going to try to keep my voice a little bit slow in speaking, because we do have people who are trying to translate simultaneously, and that can be difficult. So as we do know, education is a powerful, powerful tool. It changes people's lives. It has the ability to bring people out of poverty. It has the ability to have a completely different life from the one that one's family and one's generations before have had. I know this very well, given my own family situation, how education has been the tool to really create transformation within my family and within my life. We know also that education can lead to making better decisions for oneself, for those around us. And when we talk about it in the context of something greater, like structures that we know, for example, like the United Nations or other governmental or other kinds of institutions, we know that this idea of discernment is something that is so powerful because it allows to have better decisions for the greater good. It has that capacity. And that's where I'm coming from when I speak about education. In terms of my own experience with education, I think that what Abel talked about in the session just prior to ours is something that is so significant, because I think that many of the speakers and many of the attendees for this summit really feel and understand that education is a lifelong process. We're students of life. We learn from one another. We learn from our precious animal companions who join us for however long they join us, if we have pets. But we don't have to have pets to learn from our animal companions, right? I mean, if we just take a look out the window and we see the birds and we see how they interact, that's an easy lesson. If we go into, I don't know, any kind of area that people consider nature, it doesn't have to be a beach. It doesn't have to be a forest. It could be just taking a look at a flower, right? That tells us so much about the cycle of life and the beauty of life. If we grow food, that tells us so much and gives us so much wisdom. There's so much learning from all of this. It's not just about education for people. It's how can we understand our interdependence and our connection. So I just like to preface it with that, because I think from the speakers from today's session, we heard from our beautiful beekeeper. And again, as I said, we heard from Abel. I think there's this thread that goes through it, and that we've been very fortunate, and there's been a lot of synchronicity or a lot of resonance to have these kinds of threads join with all of our presentations. So in terms of my professional background, I have also been involved in education in a formal way. And that means that I have been teaching human rights education to high school students. That's one area. I've also been the chair of the Children's Rights Committee of the Women's Bar in New York for over 15 years. I resigned from that position, but I did that for 15 years. And one of the things that I thought was so important, me as an adult, that's great. There's the opportunity to be able to do a lot to advance the rights of youngsters within the law. But what about youngsters themselves? What about giving them a platform to have a voice so that they can be influential and be the agents of change that they are? So many of the programs that I had at these professional legal organizations, at different conferences, at special meetings, I would include youngsters, students who were attending New York City public schools. So we would go through many different kinds of issues that face youngsters around the world, including youngsters in war and child soldiering. And some of the youngsters from New York City public schools said in one program, you know what? I'm a slave in my own family. I'm a slave here in New York with what's going on with the gangs. You know, it's something that people don't realize. To hear these perspectives of youngsters who have life experience, who can offer us information that we might not realize at first blush when we think about things. So this idea of educating two youngsters, right? It's not about educating two youngsters. How can we all be peers and all educate one another and recognize that we have the capacity to learn from one another? Another important initiative at the UN that was happening for many years was the Gandhi King Season for Nonviolence for Children of the World. And this brought together a lot of youngsters in New York City public schools, but also in private schools, in schools that were run by faith-based traditions. And they'd come to the UN, and there would be this celebration of Martin Luther King, and then of Mahatma Gandhi, and the principles and the values that they shared about creating a better world for all and promoting inclusion, promoting dignity and respect, but also peace and nonviolence, and how we can get together in a harmonious way. We're very different. Many of us have different ways that we see the world. We speak different languages. We have different levels of formal education. We have different life experiences. We also have different economic situations. And we know that, that really means a lot. More money can provide a lot more opportunity. And that can really have people living in different economic strata and what that means. So this idea of inclusion and diversity, and you can see maybe the tail of one of my cats behind me joining us. She's always interested in being part of these Zooms and anything that we do with the Yoga Day Committee. She loves to either be at my feet or be on my lap. So she's with us now. We have that good kitty energy. We are all interdependent, right? So yes, I feel her now. So anyway, the Gandhi King Season for Nonviolence was another really important and special initiative, as is the student observance for the International Day of Peace, which happens in September. So these are ways, I think, that have brought youngsters together across the globe, physically, but also through webcast and video conferencing. And it allows for not only youngsters, but whoever views it, whoever's there, who is ever participating in these sessions and organizing these sessions, New York headquarters, to really see, in some ways, I talked about this great diversity that we have and the differences that we have, but how underneath it all, in some ways, we really have the same needs and the same desires to have a better world for ourselves, to be happy, to be able to have food and shelter and security in that way, to get medical treatment that we need. So these have been, I think, very, very special mechanisms to bring youngsters around the world and to bring people around the world to really see the ability that youngsters have in terms of being leaders. And as I said before, agents of change, but to being leaders. It's not the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of today. I really do believe our youngsters are leading today. It's not tomorrow, they're living today. And they're making incredible contributions today in our world. So I'd like to put that out there. The other thing that was so important to me for many years, when I was starting out as an attorney, and then, as I mentioned, with the Children's Rights Committee, for close to 20 years, I also mentored international law students in the special moot court competition. And I would mentor students in the final rounds. So the best of the best from the countries would send their best team, their winning team. So teams from Hungary, from India, from Italy, from Mexico, from Costa Rica, from Canada, of course, from the US, would meet up in Washington, D.C. and get together and do the Jessup International Law Moot Court Competition. And I would do a lot to help these teams from different countries. And that's such a fabulous way to get to know one another. It's not so much about understanding the law and learning the law. Of course, there's that component to it, but it goes so much beyond that. The process of learning goes beyond just gathering information. It, I think, goes to developing critical reasoning skills. It goes to learning how to analyze, of course, but also listening. The art of listening, and understanding people by really hearing them is another important skill. So some of the things I talk about is life skills. It's lifelong learning and life skills. And, this mentoring of these law school students was just such a gift to me. It wasn't just for the students, that I was working in the UN and it was this international law competition. And we talked about ramifications with international law and the UN Charter and what's allowed and what, that, yes, of course, that's one component to it. But I think that many of us don't realize there are so many components to things. There's, of course, the primary focus, which is international law, but then the secondary and the third. There's so much more that goes on that we don't see. And I think this goes back to what Abel was talking about, when he talked about that creative intelligence, the invisibleness of what is working with us that we don't necessarily see. But if we tune into that, right, that power, that vibration, and if we listen to that, that can help us inform our life. And we've heard many examples from him, the way he explained that in his session. And we can really live a life that affirms the movement of life in that sense. And we can really see the synchronicities in everything. So my topic, finally getting to the topic, is the Golden Rule Plus. And I say the Golden Rule Plus because I include not just people, but again, our precious, precious, precious planet and our animal companions and all life, really. All living things, all living beings, all living things, everything in the universe is living, And again, I go back to the interdependence of it all. So many people may have heard the Golden Rule. Now, I know of the Golden Rule because I I heard of this when I was young, growing up. And then when I was studying to be a minister, I did a lot of research into different kinds of faith traditions and teachings. And I learned about the Golden Rule in a different way and in more depth about it. And then when I was working at the UN, there's the mosaic of the Norman Rockwell painting, The Golden Rule. So it's something that is very close to my heart. And I'm hoping that many people know what the Golden Rule is. Is there anyone? You can write it in the chat. And I'm so happy that you're with us today in the chat. And please feel free to put comments, put questions in the chat, because I'd like for us to sort of, hear from you. It's not just about me. I can put a little bit out there, but I'd love to hear from you and what you think and how you feel things are in your life. So has anyone has not heard of the Golden Rule? Because just recently, someone who I was speaking with didn't know about the Golden Rule. And, because I've been really keeping the Golden Rule close to my heart and involved in it, I just assumed that everybody knows about it, So I was like, really? You don't know about the Golden Rule? Okay. All right. So if you don't know about the Golden Rule, now's the time, right? You probably do know about it. You just don't realize that you don't know about it. Because I think that everybody really does know about it. Because this is, I think, one of the most universal, cultural, and maybe even kind of faith-based beliefs that is out there. And we can have it in two ways, and I'll explain it to you in a minute. But the essence of the Golden Rule is do unto others what you would have them do unto you. So treat others the way you'd like to be treated. So that's just the nutshell essence of it. Now, when I was studying to be an interfaith minister, I did a little research into this. And one of the things that I learned was that way back in Confucius's time, he was speaking with some of his disciples, his group of students, and they were having these dialogues. And the version of the Golden Rule, it's called the Silver Rule, is in a negative. And I wrote it down because I really don't think about things in the negative. So I'm going to read it to you in the negative. It says, and this is, in terms of Confucius, and this is the bedrock, one of the first recorded ideas of this philosophy. Do not do unto others what you would not want others to do unto you. So it's in the negative. Don't. Refrain from. And then we have Buddha, sometime after Confucius, who said, whatever is disagreeable to yourself, do not do unto others. Again, it's in a negative, but we have this reaffirmed, right? Then if we go on in Judaism, right, we know that in Judaism we have the 10 Commandments, but we also have the way that we have behaviors that were ascribed to people. Do this, don't do that, this is bad, this is... And we have in the Gospel of Matthew, I guess what people have recognized or what they say, Jesus summarized the teachings of the Old Testament by the Golden Rule. This is why we call it the Golden Rule, because it's positive, it's affirming. And it's saying in everything you do, do to others what you would have them do to you. So you may have heard this in one way or another, or you may understand the essence of it, because in many faith traditions, we do have it, not in the same words. I mean, the words are a little different, but we do have it. And let me say it this way. I'll read from the Quran, because you may be interested to hear what the Quran says. and do good to parents, kinsfolk, orphans, the poor, the neighbor who is near of kin, the neighbor who is a stranger, the companion by your side. That's the Quran. Again, from the Torah, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, right? It's about loving your neighbor as yourself, how to love your neighbor as oneself. And we could go on and on and on and on, because again, in Hinduism, in Zoroastrianism, even in Native American spirituality, in Hinduism, I think I just said that, Sikhism, we do have this sentiment. Again, it's one of the most universal principles that faith traditions have, and that people of goodwill, I believe that people of goodwill, really feel this in their heart. But that's why I say the Golden Rule Plus, because it talks about people, and we're not just living in isolation with people. We're drinking water, we're breathing air, we're eating plants, right? So that's the reason why I say the Golden Rule Plus. And what I like to go further now is that this idea of the Golden Rule is one that I think embodies the UN's mission. And the American painter Norman Rockwell, did a painting called The Golden Rule, where he had people from different faith traditions, different ages, different races, all together, and he had this inscription, do unto others as you would have done to you, or what you would like to have done to you. And he has that in the painting. And then in 1985, President Reagan and his wife, First Lady Nancy Reagan, gave to the UN a mosaic of the Golden Rule of Norman Rockwell's painting, which is hanging on the third floor in the main building. And I would pass that so many times going in and out of the elevator when I was going into one of these chambers, trusteeship council, so I would pass it. And it would always give me such an uplifting feeling. And Norman Rockwell, I think that if I remember from my research from years ago, and I should have looked this up, that he was just so taken with the mission of the UN, and he really felt that it resonated so much, that he created, this painting, the Golden Rule, to celebrate that. And I do think that it reflects the very essence, of the mission of the UN, of the Charter of the UN, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Because at the end of the day, what are we talking about? We're talking about human dignity. We're talking about respect for others and for all life. We are talking about our interdependence, our coexistence. We're talking about the unity that we have as one humanity, right? We are talking about the unity that we have on this planet. And this is what, our advisor, I'm hoping, can speak more about this, about planetary consciousness, which he so beautifully writes about in our Light on Light e-magazine. And he's written many articles on this. I am also talking about, and I think I probably said it before, inclusivity, but sustainability as well, sustainability and development, and having people achieve to the best that they can achieve, so that they're thriving in life, so that they have opportunities in life. But at what cost? Not at the cost of someone else, not at the cost of our beautiful earth, of our Mother Earth, not at the cost of that. And at the end of the day, it's, to me, a lot of this is also about, and I alluded to it before with harmony, really about more of a peaceful coexistence and nonviolence. right now, at this moment in time, there is so much violence going on in large cities since COVID-19 happened. There's been such an increase. The statistics show such an increase in violence in large urban areas, not just in the US, but across the board, across the world, in many large cities, in many capital cities. We know about the war that's going on in Eastern Europe. We know that there are at least 27 armed conflicts and wars going on, according to the Council on Foreign Relations right now. So for me, these values, which, we see, I believe in the Golden Rule, I believe in the UN foundational documents, and I believe in the underlying philosophies of yoga, right? These values are about inclusion and of unity and of peace and nonviolence. And education is a way to help us. If we open up our mind, we're opening up ourselves, I think, to being educated by being a student of life, to let life teach us. And one of the things that I just like to share is about this evolution of human consciousness. And Sabine had asked me to speak a little bit about this because I truly believe that if we are attuned to what Abel says, the intelligence of life, or that great, great energy that is greater than all of us, that gives rise to everything within the cosmos, that people call God, but you don't have to, that we are maturing and expanding, and that our human consciousness is about realizing that we are more alike than we are different, and that we are responsible for everyone and everything. If I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. I see that in my own family. My mom had a terrible accident and she almost died. Really, it's a miracle. God protected her. I truly believe this. It's a miracle she's alive. And I moved into her house with my 2 cats. And I've been here trying to help her on her healing journey and her healing process. And when I get so frustrated and I get so mad, and I hate myself for it, but I have to be kind because I'm human, right? When I get so frustrated, and I want to say something negative, I stop myself because I know that it's coming back to me. It's only hurting me. It's really only hurting me. So it's been such a learning. Life can be such a learning if we are open to life. So I see that as we evolve individually, right, we again resonate with the vibration of others who share these same ideas, these same vibrations, these same sentiments that our heart and that our mind and that our soul share, and that we come together and we can affect things around us, people around us. We can affect changes in life. We can affect our life. We can affect the lives of others. And institutions like the UN, we support the International Day of Yoga Committee, and many other groups support the UN in its evolvement to be even greater for peoples of the world, for everyone and everything, for the sustainability of our planet. Right now, we have so much going on with climate change, as we know, and the UN has been issuing report after report and having these special meetings of the UFFC coming up, and everything like that. And it's how do we support institutions for the evolution of the human species, the evolution of humankind, and of our institutions, right? Because it's people who build and who are part of these institutions also. Yes, they have an energy of their own, but people are also involved, and we can co-create to change awareness. And I do see things changing. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, Before that, we had the Millennium Development Goals. There's a big difference between the MDGs and the SDGs. The SDGs applies to all countries around the world. The MDGs did not. They were not universal. They were just to developing countries. Well, hello, developed countries have so many issues and challenges themselves, right? People are living in poverty. People don't have shelter. People don't have education. People don't have food. People don't have medical treatment. There's domestic violence. I could go on and on and on. This is everywhere. So the fact that we have the SDGs, I think, is a huge leap. And there have been many, many people within the UN system who have laid the bedrock, I believe, for the evolution of human consciousness. And I'd like to call attention to one of them, Sri Chinmoy, who came originally from Pondicherry. And he was invited to hold these special silent meditations for world peace, which I didn't even realize the significance of that, being a UN staff person, a young UN staff person. I just go to the meditation, and the Dag Hammarskjöld Library Auditorium. I'd sit there, he'd sit up there, people would sit behind, and we'd be silent, and there's no coincidence that we have an International Day of Yoga Committee at the United Nations and that I would be one of the leaders, right? So I do believe that there are so many seeds that are being sowed and so many things happen in life that we don't understand until much later, or sometimes we don't understand at all. But that doesn't mean that things are not happening and things are not moving. I do think that there are many people who are birthing this idea that we have this consciousness that goes beyond an individual and that goes beyond us as a human civilization. So I'd like to stop there, and I'd like to invite, some questions and have more of an interaction if we can. But if you're ready, I'd like to invite our advisor from the International Day of Yoga Committee at the UN to unmute himself so that he can provide any remarks. Because as I said before, he's been at the forefront. He's worked at the United Nations for decades. He was working as his career was at the United Nations, working for the World Bank, working to create a better world through economics and beyond that in so many ways. We're so fortunate he's with us today. So if you'd like, the floor is yours.
Gracias. Thank you, merci. I am very much taken by your presentation. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. A beautiful presentation of the Golden Rule. I must say, in this little bit of improvised presentation, that I was educated. I was highly educated. I had the most privileged education. And it has taken me like 30, 40 years to run away from it, to really change the whole path, to abandon its foundation, the foundation of education, like knowing, having, and doing. Now we need to transition to a form of education of the being and the becoming. And this being and becoming is not only individual, it's not only me, but it's a lot of had to do with collective. How the collective transition for the first time in history of humanity. We are a planetary society and we don't have the planetary being. So if we talk about the future, we need to create or co-create, as you said, this planetary being. Now, if I have to summarize, I would say that, first of all, we not only, I underline, have to have an education for the future. We need to have an education for the present. The education for the future brings values of accumulation, competition, and so on, to arrive at that future, in inverted commas. We need to have people happy right now. There is a recent report that came out 2 or 3 days ago that Chile is the 4th worst country in terms of happiness.
Wow.
And that is, to me, I've been dialoguing with hundreds of people in the last few days. Why we are so unhappy? Where is education in all of this? What is the value behind education? I would say that this education of the present needs to have 4 elements to it. One is inner capacity to transcend the immediate, to transcend all this beautiful diagnostic of what's happening today in the world. The second, at one point I asked my teacher, Lama Ganchen, I said, Lama, how should we educate our grandchildren? I have several grandchildren. And he said, the only essence of education for these children is to do merits. It took me several years to understand how education should ingrain us into do merits, which is the golden rule. This is an essential topic. What you presented of the golden rule is fundamental. We are not used to do merits. That sounds like esoteric, sounds like very interesting. But the third is what the Hindus call seva, the service. Education needs to be linked to service. If we are not at service of nature, humanity, the neighbor, and so on, the golden rule will never come about, And the fourth is that it has to be experiential. Education cannot be classroom any longer. That is gone. We need to have education as an experience. And I believe that we are excessively paying attention to human law in general. I'm not talking about law in a jurisprudence sense. We need to look at natural law, and this is not esoteric, and also spiritual laws. And I think there are some spiritual laws that need to be part of this education. One is creating inner space. Without inner space, we will never realize what's happening: love, compassion, cooperation, solidarity. The other one is, as you presented it so well, is the law of interdependence. The law of interdependence. We need to really have that as a very central element. The law of the feminine. We know that this is the era of the feminine. The law of correspondence. The inner is like the outer is like the inner, when we talk about planet. And obviously, being a Buddhist, the law of karma, don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you. And to end, Denise, my short presentation, I'd like to just outline, a few little points, and if then there is interested in discussing this longer, I'm available. One is that it is not about computers. It's not about making the new technology of education only, because I did a review recently about what people think about education of the future, and it's all iPads, iPhones, and so on. I think that's not education. The real education is an education which is sitting on the self-realization of your dharma, the self-realization of your identity in this planet. If we don't know what we came here to do, whatever we do will never be satisfactory. The second point is that in Buddhism, the essence of it is to get rid of suffering. And I think we suffer too much. So education needs to be an instrument of either eliminating the causes and conditions of suffering or practicing, virtues that allow us to jump over this emotional package that we are all really involved at this point. And finally, the education and nature that you presented is fundamental. We are today into this theory of differential intelligence, like nature is not as intelligent as the human being, and therefore, what are we going to learn? How can nature educate us? And the other day, I dialogue on walking the path of water, and I thought that people were going to really shoot me, because this is something that you need to think carefully about. Hundreds and hundreds of people connected to that. What is it if we are educated how to walk the path of nature, you know? Is it really esoteric? Is it really outside education? So I stop here, and I'm full of gratitude to you and to the organizers to allow me to say these few, you know, words on education of the present. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, I loved the summary that you gave us. I think it really helped enrich things and bring in, I think, another perspective that is, I think, just so authentic, because I think that the organizers really do believe in one of the most important things that anyone can do is to realize who they are, what is their true nature. You know, that's what this life is about. And I think that the more people, you know, hear it, the more they can believe it, the more they can understand it, and the more that they can contribute to their own involvement and to, you know, the greater society and human consciousness to begin with. I do want to put you on the hot seat, Sabine, because I met Sabine. She has an incredibly wonderful project, the Peace Trees Project, which I was so happy to find out about it through our mutual friend, Paul Luftenegger. And Sabine also contributed an article to our Light on Light e-magazine, to one of our first issues of that. And she, you know, had a beautiful article about these youngsters. And I hope that, Sabine, you don't mind speaking for a few minutes about your project, because I think that it's just, it fits in beautifully here. And I'd like to highlight what you're doing with the youngsters too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. Well, I had a full presentation about it. So if people are interested with what we are doing, and I think there are a lot of common values that what your colleagues said. How can we do that now concretely and put all the things together and in our actual education everywhere? So trees are, in a few words, you will say it, planetary. Actually, it is, as you said, it's chaotic, it's incoherent. And we see all that emotional stuff, you talked about it, and all the consequences of being in incoherent state. We have lost that connection. And so we help people to become in coherent state, completely full coherent state. And because the vision of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals is a vision of coherence, of inclusion, and of kindness, and but it comes from a coherent state and from an open heart space. So we learn people to come in their true nature, and we developed an auto-coaching based on the 5 pillars of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to help people to come completely in coherent state, and from there to have access to higher level of intelligence, and to have new ideas for solving the problems related to our actual big challenges, and so that the children and the youngest can contribute with their ideas, with their actions. And so the trees, they called me trees, big trees and forests is a real model for our humanity personally, that we can achieve our dharma, as you said. So, and we are all unique beings with so much inner potential and talents and gifts, and we all have to give that to the world. And the model of the forest with that sustainable, kind, supportive, in unity, working in unity. So that's a very powerful model for our humanity today. And each different and each perfect as he is and he and she is, but working in unity, in collective intelligence. So that's what we are learning in schools and in cities. So it are the creative cities for peace and abundance and the SDGs. So it's helping people to feel the connection in oneness, on a higher level, and feel that connection. So it's so related to everything what you said, both of you, and it's beautiful to feel how the children today, as you said, both of you, are asking for more. They would like to participate much more to the construction of their future and their present. So thank you. In a few words, that's what we are doing with our NGO, Peace and Kindness in Action. And so we have a few questions for you, Denise, from our present persons. So a few people said that they didn't know what the golden rule is, so you explained them. And then Aurore said, oh, I use oftenly the golden rule with my students in so preschool. She works with preschool, and she said, but it's not easy for me to help them to understand it very good with the youngsters. How could you explain that to the youngest, Denise? What could you say to Aurore?
Well, when I'm dealing with youngsters, and I mean, I don't know if you mean preschoolers, I mean babies, to me, it's all about energy. It's not about words, it's about the feeling. I learned so much from Dr. Jane Goodall, who's a UN messenger of peace, just from the way she talked about her observation with animals and with the way they interact. And it's being, I think, not afraid to look at them in the eye, and to really see them. It's about having a real sense of presence. I think that makes all the difference with people and animals generally. It's not just about being there, but it's really being present. And especially babies and youngsters and really young ones, they're really present. It's about the feeling. You just look into their eyes and you don't have to do much, and they know you're speaking the same language. So I think that in terms of youngsters, with those who are in preschool, the question is, what is your intention? What are you trying to communicate? How are you trying to communicate that? I'm not saying that all youngsters are easy to deal with. Some of them have more energy than others. Some of them are running around. It's tough. I know what it's like to deal with youngsters too in terms of that. But I think a lot of times it's about what is our intention? What are we giving out? And what processes do we have to interact with the youngsters so that they are brought up understanding their own inner capacity from a young age, that they can recognize that themselves. I think that's one thing. And then, youngsters, And all people, it goes back to presence. I really believe want to feel validated. They want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. They want to feel special, in that sense that someone is there. I think that's another life lesson, that I'm still working on, but that's been a big thing. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know, if that's helpful or not, but I know that when there is no presence, and you're talking to a brick wall, it makes me, feel bad, frustrated, upset, even angry. So presence really can make a huge difference, and I think it starts with our intentionality, the way anything would. I see one of our core members, Isel Toprockley, is on with us too. If you, Isel, would like to contribute and just give a few sentences and join, we're happy to unmute you so that you can. Thank you for joining us today. We so appreciate you being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Denise. I'm honored to be part of the panel. In fact, initially, I just wanted to join to listen to your session. Regarding what you have said so far, let me introduce myself first. I work at UNICEF in New York, and I've been part of the activities that Denise and other colleagues have been organizing in part of the recreation community. And I'm also a volunteer at the example I can give related to this education panel session. I'm part of the volunteer group at UN Food Gardens, where youngsters are involved mainly. And since past couple of years, in a small garden, we have been growing plants, vegetables, fruits. Not so much, but just to give the idea of contributing to our environment. The youngsters are involved, and in fact, they are leading most of the activities there in the garden. It has been interrupted during COVID lockdown, but still we had a few colleagues taking care of the garden. Hopefully this year it will be resuming its normal operation. So it's also giving youngsters the idea of contributing to the environment. We are also taking care of recycling, composting, regenerating, running the garden by its own produce. Whatever is collected from the garden can also be going back to the garden again as compost, as soil to nurture itself. So it's a cycle of life in the garden. So this is just one example that I would like to contribute. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I love that UN Garden, and I do hope that it can, be more, how can I say it, more active again. But we have to see, time will tell. But, thank you so much for sharing and for doing all the work that you do. We so appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being there. Thank you for being there. So beautiful. Yes. So honored that your committee is so wonderful represented, and we feel how you spread these beautiful values, but also way of being. As you said, the presence and Denise and the connection with nature on a larger field. with the energy of everyone. And thank you so much. Thank you to the UNESCO also. Can we go on maybe with, because there are a lot of questions, Denise, and maybe you can, who wants to come in can. So it's about a question from Caroline, and it's about, the question is around the golden rule. Is it a question of, can we say it in another way? Is it my limit stops where the limit of the other starts? Is it that in parallel? That's her question of Caroline.
You know, I don't believe that, because I believe that, you know, we already enmeshed, right? You and I, we're together already. We have this we consciousness. So I don't believe in that at all. I believe in this we consciousness, that we're really, you know, already connected. We're unified together, we're connected. So I don't agree with that. I think that that might be a good starting point for some people, but as you grow in consciousness and awareness, by God's grace or by the grace of the intelligence that affirms all life, I do think that understandings change and evolve and mature. So I don't, where I am, my understanding is at this point that that's not it. Would you like to unmute yourself, Zamblinko Tabchen, and also weigh in on some of these issues too, since we have you and your wisdom as well?
Thank you.
And maybe, may I just, with pleasure, add something more? Is it in link with the law of action and reaction? That's my question.
Thank you, Denise, also. I would say that when we talk about the limits, we are putting all the energy of the mandala, the energy of the state, in the borders. And this has been a real problem in the world today, because this defense of the borders, because the first sentence is more defensive, don't touch my limits. I think the golden rule has to do with the mandala, where the power of the energy is at the center. That is to say, we are talking about the quality of being, not just limit. When I talk about the relationship with others, or what others will or will not do with me, etc., I'm talking about quality of life. This is not just my limit. I hope people go over my limits, particularly when I'm not doing well. You know, I like them to enter, you know, and say, hey, hello, you know, finish this. This is not good. So it's interesting that this principle of the golden rule applies also to the geopolitical situation of the world, you know. The famous treaty of the, you know, the state, the nation state, you know, Westphalia 1648, you know, where they say there are limits here, there are borders. So everyone created armies, you know, to protect those borders. When really there are other types of society where the strength of the mandala, this form of organizing, is at the center. We need to go at the center. And so the golden rule for me is something at the center. And one final point I want to add to the question about the youth. When I was in politics, we did a lot of surveys, you know, and polls to see where. And one of the polls was about understanding who was making decisions in the household, you know, because if the decision was made by the grown-ups, by the parents, then my propaganda, my advertising needed to go to them to change their mind and vote for me. What we found out is that nearly 90% of the decision of the household today not when I was young, are decided by the youngsters of the household. The influence of the youngster of the household today, in terms of buying a car, buying utensils, buying a dog, whatever, in essence today, the research shows that this is the youngsters. So what you are saying, Denise, is incredibly important. It's extraordinarily important. It's not just the future is not depending on us, the grown-ups, any longer. Even if we are the parents, the research shows that the great number of decisions are decided by the youngsters.
Yes, yes. They, as you said, Denise, they are the leaders of today already. And in addition, there is another question from Aurora, and she asked, do you think that the education of the future, where we are talking about, must have been doing without the politics? That's the first question. And if not, how can we help to evolve this old education system?
I'm not sure I understand the question about politics. I'm not really sure what the real question is.
I will. So our question is, do you think that the education of the future, as we are talking about it, actually here, doit se faire sans la politique, that we must do it without politics? That's our first question.
That we must do it without politics.
Yes.
When I was new to the UN and I was a young lawyer, I thought that the UN really was organized and ran on law. And I got a rude awakening by seeing that it's a political institution. Working in different jobs, I see that many of them, all of them, are political institutions. I don't know what you mean by this idea of politics in some way, because again, it goes back to life and living, and it goes back to who is in a position of power, who's the small clique that's in a position of power, right? And where the power and the control comes from. So to me, that's what I hear when I hear this kind of question. And I'm sorry if it's not the answer that you want to hear, but this is from my experience and how I interpret it from my life. So getting back to politics, in terms of education for the future, we have to take a look at many different things. How are our education systems set up? Where does the funding come from, right? Because people with more money want to have a certain voice in how things get structured and how things are ordered and how things are taught and what is not taught, right? And a lot of times we can say, well, that's the politics of it all, right? So I think that we need to, again, really come back to understanding who I am. Who am I, right? I am a soul having a human experience. Who am I? And what is my role? What are my gifts, my talents? What can I contribute? Right? So when I speak about education for the future and I speak about this evolution of human consciousness, this is what I'm speaking about. Understanding truly who I am, right? And my place in the world and how can I contribute to the best of my ability. And that means we need a revolution in education. We need a revolution in law. We need a revolution in politics. We need to change the systems that we have in place now because they're not serving the peoples and the world. So I really believe that by understanding who we are and not being afraid to act and to change our behavior, right? And to bring up youngsters by understanding who they are and understanding that that is the priority, right? Not how to, earn $20 billion so that you can buy Twitter. That I think is about setting a huge change in all of the systems that we have, because we really do need to transmute things. Maybe we need to rebuild starting from scratch. I don't know if, we change things and that really is solving it. I think that it's sometimes we have to start with new models and new ways of acting, and that takes off. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's what I hear, and that's how I feel compelled to respond.
And Aurore is thanking you, as she said, super with big stars. So I think okay, thank you to thank you, Aisel. Okay, wonderful. There are other questions. And maybe is it? I asked a question about the law of action and reaction, because you gave an example of it, and when you talked about a sad or a bad idea of angry about your mom or the situation, and you said no, I don't do that because what I do to others, it comes back to me. That's what you said. So is the golden rule plus, is it in connection with that consciousness of we are all connected in that oneness of energy, and that everything energy that comes out for me returns? That's just a question to me on the same vibration.
I've never thought of it that way. That's an interesting way to think about it. What I can say, though, is I know that 20 years ago, right, if I did something that, wasn't that nice, it may have taken me, I don't know, a few days, a week before something hit me, came back at me, right? Now, it's like instantaneous. It's like, oh, wow. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I was naughty. Or,
it's incredible.
Or, I mean, okay, I get it now. I get it. Okay, yeah, I know. So, it's I never thought of it that way. It's interesting. It's an interesting way to think about it.
Yes, thank you. And I come back to the question of Aurore, the first question, and we said, how can we do it with little children? And what came to me was children are learning with the example of the adults. And the golden rule, well, I feel is you spoke about the presence, that intense presence. And also, I think, be an example, because when the adult is violent to the child, he brings that model inside. Or what do you think about it, And he learns that it is not the golden rule, I feel, the essence of that is transmission.
I absolutely agree with you that youngsters, they are a sponge. They see things, they take it up, they mimic us. And I think that if anybody knows of Bruce Lipton and some of his books, The Biology of Belief and Epigenetics and things like that, he talks about how the brain is wired and how in the first, even in womb, until a youngster is 4 or 5 years old, this youngster absorbs all the programs of its parents and is already wired to react in the way that the parents do in many ways. So in terms of youngsters and modeling adult behavior of those close to them, absolutely. They mimic it, they do it, they repeat it. Absolutely. They watch everything, and that's why it's so important to be vigilant in every moment. How can I be vigilant? How can I be the best that I can be? How can I be life affirming and follow the movement of life forward in the most positive sense for me and everyone else? Absolutely. Youngsters are at such developmentally, from a neuroscientific perspective. Absolutely. So if you'd like Dr. Bruce Lipton, he has many books. There are many others, but I mean, he just seems to talk a lot about this, when he talks about limiting beliefs and limiting patterns, and how to transcend that. And he talks about the honeymoon effect, which is a later book that he has. But he talks about this quite frequently. So if you're interested in knowing more, Dr. Bruce Lipton.
Yeah, thank you. And as Aisel said, I think doing things with little children, being kind with nature, cultivate together vegetables, be kind to other animals, they see everything, and I think, what do you think about it, Aisel? So that being that example, and in that way to print positive programs in children.
Thank you, Sabine. My comment was because to represent UNICEF, we have to go through some approvals. So I just wanted to clarify this.
Okay, thank you.
To avoid any
Excuse
misunderstandings.
Good.
So regarding the involvement of youngsters in the activities, in fact, it has been the main goal of the organization. I can say mainly because since it's mainly dealing with the children and mothers and their education, everything, I'm just participating as a volunteer in some activities. And it is, in my experience with the garden, it has been kind of involving the young generation into changing environments, since we are more considering of climate change and everything is changing, and these things are getting more kind of away from their usual life. So they are learning now how to produce their own garden, own vegetables, how everything is naturally, or how everything used to be done before. So it is possible to do those things for the environment and for ourselves, for human beings, and for, of course, other animals and other life environment, the whole planet. So in this regard, I think it is sharing and doing whatever positively we can do for the next generations, as we are grown-up adults and know these things and can help others, young people, to learn, and it's just passing on the knowledge from the old generation to the new generation.
So important.
Well, let's hear from the grandfather, right? Someone has grandchildren.
Yeah.
So what do the grandchildren do? I guess that's the question.
Denise, thank you very much. I believe that we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean education in relationship to our children? Because we might be wrong. If our level of consciousness is not very high, we might be having a presence factor that is not sufficiently strong to move to the right direction. This is very important because when people say, action, 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 my question is what precedes action? And that's where education needs to be. Because once the people have acted, the children has thrown the stone to the window, we have to repair the window. The idea is that he doesn't or she doesn't throw that stone. And here there are three things that we might actually consider. One is the right vision. And I believe the golden rule plus, I like the plus, must be central to the formation of a vision about education. The second is the right intent. What is behind this? I find that in many systems of education, there is an intent, an implicit intent. For example, I was, when I was a youngster of a migrant family, all was education, the intent was to have a job. They were so poor, they said, no, you have no choice. You have to get educated. I don't know what that it meant at the time. Now for me, it's something totally different. What is to get educated? In essence, to me now, get educated is to self-realize myself, But anyways, there was no choice. So the intent was to have, under this survival mode we had as migrants. So there is the right vision and the right intent. And we need to be very careful about the intent. Today, there are many psychologists questioning books for children. What is underneath this message in a society that lives not by reality? The society lives by emotions. How you manipulate emotions to get kids to where you want to go. And the third is the right language. There is a social grammar today in education that is not conducive, to this future we seems to be aspiring for. In my country, I've said this is not a criticism. This is a message for change. In my political campaign, I said, look, the education we have here is the education of the 14th century. This is not the education of the future. And then the debate begins. Is this about computers? Is this about iPads, iPhone? No, it's not about that. It's to define a path where we have a clear understanding of communication, how we're going to have this communication, the messaging. But if the social grammar continues to be to exercise this excitement behind emotions that in general to me are not that good, it's a value judgment, I understand that, then we have a problem. We have a problem of how we project the feminine and masculine energy, to name one, which is very controversial. How do we deal with sexual education of children? There are schools where this is forbidden. This is not a topic. How do we deal with rights in a society that is moving from market to rights? How do we deal with a planetary society where, to me, a child in India, it's affected by a child in Chile or a child in the United States? How do we deal with this? So action comes after vision, intent, and language. Otherwise, the behavior behind education or the result of education, it's to me very, very limited. Today, in many countries, and Denise, that I travel quite a bit, people don't read anymore. It just there are no endorphins behind a book anymore. We need to create endorphins in education so the child is interested, is engaged into that. We celebrated this weekend the UN World Day of the book, of the textbook. But who is reading books? I'm writing books, and I'm all the time writing, and people say, why do you write books? Just write in e-books, everything is and I want to connect with the public, but the question is, who wants to connect? Sabine is doing something extraordinary. You are trying the children to connect with the reality, the substance, the divinity of nature. A tree. Wow, I'm a Mayan priest. So for me, trees mean a lot of stuff, And so I would say that it's very relevant. And my last point is that I am teaching my grandchildren with experience, not with theory. So when they come to my place in the southern part of Chile, they climb mountains, they climb fences, stone fences, and they have to walk through the mud. And then they come back and say, wow, this is very interesting, Grandpa. This was not easy, but it's interesting. We took the last fruits, because we're entering now into autumn, and they, with a basket, go and pick up these fruits. It's an incredible experience. It's not stupid. It's not simple. This connection, selecting the good ones from the bad ones, the big ones from the little ones. And, it's a big, big thing. I do horticulture in part of my land for them. So they can go and pick up, something from the tomato, a corn or whatever. That is the way I see the future. The future begins with the understanding of who we are, not who the others are only. You cannot understand the others without your self-identity. My last point, and I shut up, is that I am one of those who have brought spirituality into politics, economics, and business. My books on this and so on. The central point is, spirituality must be where it is not. If we are only a club of people who speak the same, say the same, we are not in the right place. And I said that politics without spirituality is a suicidal path. But spirituality without politics, without the reality of power, with the reality of life, is just a theory. We talk about karma, dharma, but what are we changing? Remember that the greatest teaching of Hinduism is karma yoga. There is no enlightenment without action. But it has to be what Denise always teaches us, that it has to be a form of action that comes from yoga, from an understanding of the transcending. That is the true education for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Denise, can you tell us a few words about the values of yoga and how you experience this all together, where you are, and also with all the communities where you're in connection with all these peoples around the world? We have 5 minutes. I don't see other questions, or if people have other questions, please notice them. Denise, would you like to?
Yeah,
to talk
sure.
about that? Because you have that in common with Ambling, and also as where you are, you bring that consciousness and that spirituality where there isn't. And I think that we all are in that way. Also in education, in actual education, bring a certain form of spirituality is just life, being alive, fully life, living being. So sorry, I'm listening. We are listening to you.
No problem. Aurora, I hope that you had a better understanding from just hearing now the way Zamling Kotap-Chen spoke, especially about spirituality and politics and spirituality. So I'm hoping that that gives you a clearer understanding and provides a richness, to this session, so that, you have, I think, maybe more understanding or more questions. And feel free to reach out to him or myself. We're happy to be in touch with you. So I just like to say that there are so many people of goodwill, of good heart, who are taking action to create a better world for everybody. And we do see this in the United Nations with the accredited NGOs that are doing such wonderful work on the ground to make a difference in the everyday life of people. We have many yoga communities. Ramchandra Mission is one of them. Yoga in Daily Life is another one of them. The Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University is another one. I could go on and on and on. We do also have other faith-based groups that are doing the same thing with the projects they're doing. But one of the things that I like to highlight is an interfaith group that came together, and it's the Global WASH Alliance. And this is different faith-based actors who got together to really promote building toilets in rural areas. It started in India, but then it's being spread out to many other countries, because this really does restore dignity to a lot of people. Rather than going and defecating in open latrines, this really, I think, restores dignity, especially to women who have their menstrual time and to young girls who are not sent to school because they don't have a private and safe way to take care of their health needs during this time of the month. So this movement by GWASH, the Global Interfaith WASH Alliance, I think is something that has the best intention with the underlying principles of yoga, and having that action to really create a difference, a real difference in the lives of everyone, not just the girls, not just of the women, but the men and boys as well. So this is something that I do like to promote. I also like to promote our e-magazine, the International Day of Yoga Committee special edition of Light on Light e-magazine that's come out, because we highlight what's going on in the UN. How is the UN experiencing yoga? How are people involved in the system experiencing it and practicing it? And how are the accredited NGOs actually taking these underlying principles, the principles I alluded to before that we find, that I believe are in the Charter, that are in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Again, dignity, respect, tolerance, right? Unity, harmony, interdependence, inclusion, peace, nonviolence, and taking action together, collective action around our common goal to help people and to better their situation in life, to have a better progress in one area or another. So there's so much that is going on, and please take a look at our Facebook page. So it's Yoga Day Committee.
And can you note? Yeah, I will notice it. Okay. And during that time, Aurore is to all of you really much thank you for examples. And Aurore said, it makes my heart so warm to see that there are lights who are shining in the politics, also in the politics. And she said, it's just like a candle who shines a dark space and have such a more important impact. So thank you so much. People are so grateful to you all, to the three Gracias. And okay, thank you. You said, so thank you so much. It's time for us to close. We are so honored to have you, all of you. Yes, a warm hug and my heart and peace to our heart and connections through our hearts in oneness. And thank you so much for your intervention and all the highlights. So profound, and I think you offered us a new view of what the Golden Rule, the importance of the Golden Rule Plus can have in our personal and collective life and create a better world altogether. So thank you so much, Denise. Zambling, and also your first name is Isel.
Yeah.
Would you like to say something more? I see that Abel is there too. Yes, thank you so much for joining.
I just would like to thank you all, especially Denise, to allow me to attend this event. It has been great. And I just would like to add Mr. Zambling's comments on writing and reading books. In fact, with the change or with the introduction of internet and access to knowledge, there is a huge resource of knowledge, information, books, everything. Everything is like he mentioned. But please do continue writing, because I think eventually everybody wants to read everything, but time is getting limited to do all. So we have more to look at in a limited time. I think it's also important to just motivate the young people to read books, whether it's paper or on the internet in digital form. We still need those sharing of dreams, knowledge, everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Abel is there too.
Yes.
Abel, thank you so much for organizing this summit, this amazing summit, who connects so many people, amazing people from everywhere, and that we can share in such a beautiful and simple way as one human family. And it can be so easy. And maybe Zambling, you would like to add something?
Only gratitude. Only gratitude. And I thank Denise for always creating the unexpected. And to you, Sabine, congratulations. You managed this exchange very, very well.
Thank
and
you.
To the new friend of Education for the Future, I sent him a message yesterday so he knows that I am here speaking from Chile. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you
very much.
Thank
you
so
very much.
Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And Sabine and Abel, you know, it's our great pleasure with the International Day of Yoga Committee at the UN, you know, to help be a co-sponsor of this event and to promote these ideas of connection, of unity, and really for us to have a better understanding of who we are. So thank you. And Abel, thank you so much for all of your time, energy, effort, intention, the lack of sleep, the on and on and on and on that goes on with it. You know, really so appreciative of everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. You imagine if we were all together in a big room, how powerful it would be.
Thank you so much for your support once again, Denise, and all your amazing team. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Merci,
Bye.
Jessica.
Bye,
Merci,
Joe.
Brian.
Merci beaucoup.
safe.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Jessica, the translator.
And Brian.
And Brian too, yes.
Voilà.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Merci.